everyone. Today, we're sitting down for a conversation focused around operational resilience in the aviation industry, specifically focused around high demand events. This is particularly relevant today, given we're preparing for the upcoming 2026 FIFA World Cup. My name is Iris Asantraj, and I lead the go-to-market for our consumer business at Cognizant. And today I'm joined by an amazing group of experts across the travel and hospitality industry who combined have over a century's worth of deep industry expertise. So it's bound to be a great conversation with all this wealth of knowledge that's surrounding us. And I'm not going to say who's leading the pack to get us to 100, but it's a great group. So first we have Maurice Jenkins, who spearheads next generation airport innovation as the Chief Innovation Officer at Miami-Dade Aviation Department. We're also joined by Sean Greger, who leads cutting edge technology solutions for air transport as the President of the Americas at SETA. And last but not least, Kevin Kaur, my fellow colleague, who drives transformative strategies for our global travel and hospitality brands as the consulting leader here at Cognizant. So as we think about the upcoming 2026 FIFA World Cup, it's expected to be one of the largest air travel events in North American history. There are projected to be over 6 million visitors traveling to the US. So this really means that airports, airlines, as well as government entities and most travel and hospitality organizations really need to plan differently and coordinate at unprecedented levels to deliver on exceptional customer experience while really maintaining a high level of safety and security for passengers. So to kick things off, I wanted to set the scene a little bit and ask each of you a quick question before we get into a little bit more of a roundtable discussion. So I'll kick it off with Kevin. And Kevin, as we think around large transformation programs, what is one capability that you would say airports and airlines really need to stand up at least 6 months in advance before a mega event like this in order to avoid a scramble during peak travel times?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there are a lot of things that they need to get right. So airlines, airports really need to be thinking about a lot of different things. How do they make sure all their programs are completed in place? They don't have construction projects still underway, whether it's around the roadways or around the other infrastructure. But I think the one thing that they really need to make sure they get right is to have the plan in place. So it's that meticulous planning, the preparation, the readiness to execute. And the World Cup in 26 is going to be unlike any other event that we've seen in North America. The World Cup in 1994 still holds the record for the most travelers in a single day at about 3.7 million travelers. We'll see numbers much higher than that because the World Cup this year is going to be 50% larger. There'll be 48 countries participating instead of 32. So that necessity to really have a plan in place, to understand what's expected, to have the partners in place, to have all the pieces ironed out, worked out. That's the one thing that I think airlines, airports really need to have nailed down before we get into this event.
Thank you. And Maurice, as we think about preparing for operational resilience at airport scales, which pressure points have you seen spike first? And what has surprised you maybe the most around some of the recent high traffic surges? I think the last Thanksgiving Day that just passed was one of the record high travel days in U.S. history. So curious from your experience, where have you seen some surprises around high traffic surges?
Well, great question. It's also a pleasure to be here. There's just a lot of factors when we're looking at it, and for us having this conversation now, just coming out of the Thanksgiving holiday, and we saw the increase in traffic surges. As we prepare to go into next year and looking at the volumes as what World Cup will bring to North America, and especially to Miami, there's going to be a requirement for more accessibility to resources. And we're looking at from parking facilities, because we're about to open a brand new parking garage to be able to accommodate that. We're doing some construction development now to be able to deal with increased passenger volume. And being able to support that safely and securely is always a challenge. But what we've seen in the coordinated effort started over a year ago. Just sitting down with FIFA, sitting down with the stakeholders, and looking at previous events, because, we did have a soccer event here, I think, with 2 countries out of Latin America, and it created an impact of realizing how do we prepare a little bit better, or what the future looks like. And we have some key games that are going to be played in Miami as well. So ramping up, working with the logistics side of the house, dealing with law enforcement, looking at fire rescue, all these things to ensure that you are safe and secure and sound in attending the event. We as an airport ensuring that we have the opportunities to be able to support personal aircraft. So some of our general aviation airports to be able to have the ability for private aircraft coming in so we can properly stage them and be able to provide fuel and other aspects. So while we deal with some of those items like we do with Formula One, but also coming and going through Miami, that how do we increase and provide additional value-added resources within that? So that's what's taking place now. A lot of planning, a lot of preparation. So we're ready to go. But yeah, it's been a challenge, but it's been working with great partners of putting everybody together at the table. So I guess one of the key factors of learning about this is getting the key stakeholders at the table and walking through these scenarios to make sure that nothing is left off the table as we prepare for this event.
Thank you. And Maurice, I think the great thing with you is that you've had a little bit of prep with obviously Thanksgiving, the recent Art Basel event we just had here this past weekend. So you're slowly getting to the big banger this summer.
It's almost like we're old hacks at this, right? But there's always a little nuance that can come up, but we're prepared. I mean, we live for this. It happens several times a year. We also get the national championship football game this year as well, coming up doing it as the year ends and 2026 kicks off. So there's more opportunities for more learning experiences that we can expect as well.
Thank you. And Sean, really you sit, I think, at the intersection of mission critical data as you're sharing across the different entities. In peak scenarios, what real-time insights and signals are you seeing that are really the most predictive? And then how do you help share that insight across the various stakeholders that you work with without compromising data sovereignty?
Well, thanks, Iris. And again, it's a pleasure to be here. This topic is really near and dear to our hearts at CETA. CETA was created 76 years ago by a group of global airlines. We remain owned by the airlines today. We are present. We support virtually every airline in the world. We're present in over 1,000 airports. And the last 40 years, a big part of our strategy actually has been supporting events like this. And these events have really been a catalyst for innovation, both from CETA and within the broader industry. So, just to name a few, the 1984 LA Olympics was where we first introduced common use terminal equipment, which gave the airports there the flexibility to move around different airlines. At the 2000 Sydney Olympics is where we first introduced digital travel credentials to allow pre-clearance of passengers, working with the government of Australia. In 2004 in Athens, we had a really interesting solution where we moved the ability for the athletes to check into the athletes' village, something that was very innovative at that time. In 2022, the Qatar World Cup was where we first really started to embrace biometrics as the flow through the airports, and that was really, that was a really successful innovation for us. So, and I could go on, right? World Cups, the Hajj, etc. It's really, really important to us. Now, specifically to address your question. What we find is the touch points within the airports provide a lot of really critical data. Touch points include the self-service kiosks, the self-bag drops, the pre-security gates, and even biometric lanes in places like Doha. And that data, obviously, when folks are interacting with those systems, there is personal information that is utilized. But we're actually able to capture the operational data. and share that with the various stakeholders in the airports, including the government, concessionaires, the airlines as well. And that gives a sense of what is happening in the airport, what airline systems are being accessed by the various common use touch points, and understand where the flows are moving.
Yep. I think we all, being in the travel and hospitality industry, obviously everything we talk about is really focusing on the customer experience at the center of it all. And as we think about customer experience, what are some of the critical things for airports and airlines that they really have to get right? Like, what are those groundbreaking things that just must be right around high volume events like this? And what needs to be done to make sure that they execute on those properly? Maybe Sean, I'll kick it off to you.
Sure. So every year at CETA, we do a number of surveys, but one of them is our Passenger IT Insights survey. And this year's survey was really, really interesting because what it demonstrated was that the vast majority, 7 in 10 passengers, are comfortable using biometrics. Over 80% want to use self-service. And that is really, really critical at these, as Maurice knows, in these high traffic events to really move passengers efficiently through the system. The other element that's very important here is communication, right? Being able to inform the passengers in terms of what is happening in the airport. And we think there's really two key ways of doing that. One is through dynamic digital signage in the airport, but the other area is actually pushing messages to the personal devices of the passengers. And that's a little bit more complex because most of the passengers aren't embracing airport specific applications, but most actually use the airline application. So what's required there is strong interaction between the airports and the airlines so that those messages can be shared with the passengers.
That's pretty cool. If I could chime in on that a little bit, Sean's 100% correct. Some of the things that we looked at, yes, a lot of people have a high reliance on leveraging the airline applications, and we've always come to say, if you need something, drop it into an app. And it used to be, if you build it, they will come. But what we're starting to see as well is there are too many apps. And if that is the case, then if I am transitioning through an airport or I'm trying to complete a task or get from one place to the next, do I have to stop opening the app and engage with that and to go from there? And what we're hearing from some of the focus groups we've done is that the answer is no. So what we've done is leverage a little bit of what Sean has alluded to is we've been demoing now our omni-channel chatbot. So what we've done is taken our mobile app and consolidate that into this chatbot, and we're going to tie that with the hologram pretty soon. But within that chatbot, leveraging existing tools on your mobile device today, such as Messenger, WhatsApp, there's a voice tool as well, and being able to just, as you're traversing and moving through the airport, be able to engage with that as you're in transition. You don't have to load another app, and you're actually engaged with real-time, up-to-date data, and you can actually control your journey. And I think that's what the passenger says. It goes back to your first question, Iris. If the only way you're going to have a satisfied customer is a customer says, I want to be able to do something quickly, but I want to have the ability to control my journey, and I'm not let it be reliant upon someone else or a series of other entities. So if you can put that together and you can make that decision-making as to what you want to do, then you go from there, i.e., let's say security checkpoints. We have the ability, and then we work with CETA on that, on security wait times at our checkpoints. With that, we make it available within the app. You know how long it's going to take to go through security. You make that decision. Do I want to get in line now? Do I want to stop and have a beverage or do something else before I get in line? Or how can I prearrange and make that happen? That's one part of the destiny. You get to make that decision. What happens? We look at other facets. We recently launched EPP, a CBP product coming through back into the country. Working with CETA, we're actually the first airport to actually launch EPP on CBRS, our own private wireless network. So now we have the ability to scale, add more devices, shrink devices, relocate where necessary. I don't have to worry about plugging up and connecting to data run cable, run conduit, I'm saving costs, but now I'm scalable and flexible enough. If I need to provide that resource, if I'm working with my stakeholder, let's say CVP says, hey, we want to be able to expand this because we have a high influx coming in. We have the ability to pivot more quickly than we probably could have in the past. So technology and innovation and working with your business partners are, to me, are the strongest KPIs that you can work on delivering to help meet some of this demand. Because as Kevin alluded to, that number is supposed to be 3, 4, 5 million, maybe more, but you don't know. It depends on who's playing what, who gets out of that group stage and who's playing who. That number can morph tremendously. And then we need to be able to prepare for that. Now, one of the other items we talked about with common use self-service kiosks, we're going to be the first airport, and we work with CETA on that. And some of our common use devices, we required some of them to be wireless and battery operated running on CBRS, which means now I have more flexibility. I can actually literally place them anywhere within my airport space. So if we get overly congested, I can move it to cargo. I can do all of these things and still maintain the sovereignty of my airport, still maintain the security of the airport, and then working with us business partners, how well can we deliver this? So all of these permutations that we're looking at leads to more efficiency and leads to hopefully we get to the point to ensure that we have better customer satisfaction.
Maurice, you are selfishly getting me very excited around all this innovation to see how it's going to improve my Starbucks pickup experience at the Miami airport, because the line is always so long.
Well, as a matter of fact, we were. And I'm using some AI modeling tools to examine the length of the time that you wait in line and how do we adjust that. So that's a great another question.
Yeah.
Actually working on that.
I just had a couple other real quick thoughts on that, Iris. And Maurice talked about a few things, sharing information about security wait lines, looking at models to understand what passenger traffic will look like. All those are really important. Thinking about the end-to-end customer journey through the airport and getting onto the plane. If you think about what's important to the customer, they want to make sure they get on their flight departs on time, they get to their destination with their luggage and baggage, things like that. But if we look at that customer journey and really understand what the pain points are, we'll see things like wait times in security lines. So Maurice is talking about how to address that, how to be adaptive, how to share information with the customer so you push it back into their hands a bit. I think all those are really good ideas. And then other innovative things that can be done, that more advanced modeling that Maurice talked about. How can we use better advanced tools, like AI, ML ops, to really understand what the traffic's going to look like. And then the last piece of it is, rather than have customers wait in line, a number of airports in North America are adopting a reservation system where the customer can actually reserve a time to go through the TSA checkpoints. And there are a couple things. So it's almost like a Disney Fast Pass type of a model. There are a couple things. One, it's great for customer experience because the customer knows what's going to happen or expects what to happen. The other piece of it is you can push customers towards the concession areas outside of security, and you can drive more revenue for your concessionaires, for the airport itself because of that. So a customer may get there 2 hours before their check-in time. What are they going to do? Well, they might sit down, have a coffee. They may buy a magazine. They may go to a bar, whatever they might do. So there are a number of things that you can do that are just a little bit different than business as usual that can also improve that customer experience quite a bit.
Kevin, great response. We demoed that. It worked very well. It's just from a timing, staffing, coordination perspective, we just couldn't put all of that together. But then again, you're right. Nothing's off the table. So what's the next level of reserving a time in line? Is it that, or are we restructuring the checkpoints? Because we're doing some checkpoint redevelopment as well to create more efficiencies. But at the end of the day, it's what's next, what's available. We've always said one thing as we subscribe to of nothing is off the table. And if I can draw an efficiency with technology and I can enhance the customer experience, and on top of that, if I can generate revenue on top of that, that's like the icing on the cake. We'll take it all. So that's the reason why we work with business partners, the reason why we engage well with CETA. That's the reason why we're having the conversations with you guys with Cognizant. It's who's sitting out there can actually work on creating transformational change. And the industry needs to do that. And we need it because you've had the same players playing in the space for so long. But you want that level of refinement. You want that level of engagement because, and I always say this and over them ad nauseum, we're moving 6, 7, 8 billion people across this global ecosystem every year. And if you look at this one event, that's going to spike it. But in the next 5 or 10 years, our numbers are going to double. How are you going to satisfy the level of consumer demand and that business need? So this is like the preamble to the Constitution, right? You're starting at something. You're going to be able to evaluate this, like, what else can we do to help and plan for what the future looks like?
You guys are getting me excited around all of this innovation that's happening.
It's all Sean's fault. Blame him.
Thank you all. That was very, I think, some very helpful background in terms of what's happening around the customer experience and making sure that although there's so much noise going on in the background during these large surge events, the customer experience really continues to elevate as we move forward and they don't experience any disruptions. As we kind of turn the page a little bit and think about in the back end, what needs to be right in order to deliver on that excellent customer experience around forecasting and planning around large influx events like this. Maybe Maurice will kick off with you and then we can go over to you, Sean. But from your perspective, what would you say are the most effective technologies or strategies to help airports estimate passenger levels in order to be prepared to deliver excellence during these high volume circumstances?
I think one of the key facets of that is an airport having a good airport operational database, having the ability to engage with its stakeholders and its business partners, as well as its technology providers as well, because the data that we can aggregate from what we get from our AODB and our resource management system and what we use for passenger processing gives us the true empirical data of what the environment looks like today. You take that and you tie it with OAG and it gives you an opportunity to look at flight schedules. We now take that data and says, based upon the size of the aircraft, this is the maximum load of passengers that can be on that aircraft. And then we take the data of where are the flights originating from. And we look at that level of passenger load. So now you get a better idea about how we estimate what that level of passenger consumption looks like. And then we take our capacity. What can we meet? We look at those numbers and that determines our level of demand. And we need to ensure that the demand can meet the capacity that we can offer. What we try to avoid, unless you're dealing with some level of irregular operations, is if the demand exceeds capacity, what do you have? Chaos, right? You have disruptions, you have delays. That does not bode well from a customer satisfaction perspective. So we take all that into consideration. It's coordinating with the airlines. Are you looking to increase your flight schedules based upon World Cup, like you do for the summer holidays and winter breaks? So airlines do. It's all that level of coordination that takes place in the back end. But at the same token, it's grabbing all of that data. And then at some point, we're going to be layering that with some AI modeling to do more predictability of what those numbers can look like and tie in events and the number of people those events draw. Now we have a better idea of what we can expect and what we expect to deal with. And that's now the whole garage to gate scenario, right? Because now it's the whole customer satisfaction, the customer experience level starts from the time that you're starting to pull up to the upper drive to drop off your family member. If there's a backlog and there's traffic coming into the airport, it's like, wow, my day is not going to end well or it's not going to start well. We want to start from there. So how do we start leveraging that data to ensure that that level of flow goes well there? You get dropped off, you're getting through the terminal, you're traversing to the terminal check-in, security checkpoint. We want to get to the gate. You need to do food and beverage. I want you to have your coffee, but I don't want to get you the coffee with 5 minutes before you need to jump on your flight. I need that lag time for you. So all of this data is what allows us to do better predictability and better planning around ensuring that your journey is a comfortable one, it's a safe one, it's a secure one, but it meets to your level of expectation.
Helpful. Sean, anything you'd add on there? Or
yeah, so I totally agree with everything Maurice just said. A couple other nuances, though, for these types of events to consider is taking into account stadium schedules. Right, that's information we will have in advance, and we can anticipate surges of passengers based on both stadium schedules and then also transit schedules, transit disruptions, et cetera. Maurice talked about the flow of traffic coming into the airport. Well, that can, when you're talking about massive numbers of people all at once, that can create a bad experience. So that's something to really that we really need to keep in mind in our experience. The other interesting point here is that we're going to be dealing with passengers of all different demographics, right, and all different comfort levels in terms of traveling through airports. As we like to say at CETA, if you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport, right? They're all different. And we're going to have some very, very well-seasoned travelers. May have people that have never traveled internationally before, and we need to take that into account. And so often when I'm visiting different airports internationally, I see incredible investments in self-service, in biometrics, in self-bag drop. But depending on the demographics of the flights, sometimes that equipment isn't getting used, and that puts strain on different on the check-in counters, et cetera. So we can actually model what to expect in terms of the adoption of the technologies in place based on the passengers that we expect to see, based on the game schedule. So really some interesting sources of information for this event that we might not normally have.
I'll add one more thought to that. And Maurice and Sean both talked about building the analytics models, thinking about some of the data. And for an event like this that is over a defined period of time, I think there's also some interesting third-party data that could be pulled in, or third sources of data that can be pulled in. As an example, what are hotel bookings looking like in some of the destination cities or host cities over periods of time? What are short-term rental numbers looking like over periods of time where the events are going to occur? So now that we know what the draw is, excuse me, we know what the dates will be for the host cities. We can start to look at some of those other factors and pull those in. So looking at historic data, looking at flight data, looking at traffic data coming into an airport, and maybe being creative about what are some other sources of data. As an example, I just saw this morning that Airbnb rates in Dallas and Fort Worth, now that the host city dates have been announced, are double what they were just a month ago. So there's this interesting dynamic that's happening that I think airlines, airports can look to and say, here's what I expect traffic to be based upon my own data. Here's what I think it could be based upon some of these third-party and external sources of data that we could pull in as well.
Thank you. And I think you've each kind of touched a little bit around the broader ecosystem that's encompassed around these events, whether it's airports, airlines, TSA, hotels, different ancillary providers. I think, Sean, when you first opened up, you kicked off by talking about the 1984 Olympics, and we talked about the 2000, 2004 events. So there's obviously a breadth of different events that have happened in the past, and probably a lot of lessons along the way around what can be done right and what needs to be tweaked for future. So how would you say, what are some of the efforts of the different ecosystem providers? How can they really be coordinated, right, in order to be prepared in advance around planning, execution, and recovery plans? Really, what are some of the continuity and contingency plans that can be put in place to get this right from the start?
Sure, that's a great question. And we really see two key strategies that do require the collaboration of various stakeholders, be they TSA, government, airlines, airports, city planners, et cetera. The first one is expand the airport, right? So how do you move processes outside of the airport? I talked about Sydney Olympics, which was really innovative in terms of having actual check-in capabilities in the athletes' villages. Well, for these big events, we should be looking at where can we provide check-in capabilities beyond the airports, in public areas, in hotels, and then even more importantly, where can we implement baggage solutions outside of the airport, secure baggage solutions that can make a huge difference and reduce the stress of the passengers. Of course, that takes collaboration of various stakeholders to make that happen. The second strategy that we think is really important is something we like to refer to as export the border, right? I spoke about the Sydney Olympics, which was really kind of a groundbreaking way to provide digital, pre-clearance digitally of passengers coming into Australia. We took that to the next level in Qatar, and now the capabilities are even further, where you can do all kinds of biometric processing in people's home countries. No one is arriving that shouldn't be arriving, and then when they get to the airport, it's a smooth flow through the airport. So really, export the border, expand the airport. Great strategies for these types of events.
Thank you, Sean. And we've clearly got a very flustered puppy in the background somewhere. I can hear it.
Do I need to redo that?
No, it's all good. So on that, Maurice and Kevin, anything you'd like to add on that?
No, I think Sean hit the nail on the head. I'm sorry, Kevin.
No, go ahead.
Because we've had conversations with our seaport because we're great partners. Because coming through Miami, as you know, you fly to Miami and you head over to the cruise port and back and forth. So looking at the amount of baggage, but you want to be able to store it properly, ensure that it can properly be scanned, and then safely put on board the right aircraft with the right ways. But expanding upon your borders, we're landlocked, right? So our footprint is kind of small compared to most other airports. So when you're dealing with a situation like that, then you start to look at where you can create other operational efficiencies. And Kevin, I'm sure you have some. I'd love to hear those. But it is ideal as we look at the whole entire end-to-end process. Is every piece and every nuance needs to be considered to ensure that nothing is left off the table. That all needs to be all encompassed to ensure that you have a smooth journey as you look at it.
Yeah. And there are a couple of thoughts to this question. Sean talked about baggage, which, continues to be a challenge. Some of the airlines in North America do better than others. Some of the international airlines do better than North American airlines. But lost and mishandled baggage is still a big issue for the airlines. How do they handle that? And some of them are beginning to adopt now electronic bag tags, permanent bag tags, where that activity that Sean talked about can be moved outside the airport premise. So a passenger can check a bag, can pay for the bag before they get at the airport. Then all they need to do at the airport is just drop it off. So there's some things like that are emerging that airlines could probably do more of. I think from a perspective of the airports, the airlines working together, how can they do a better job? Airlines know how many customers they expect on a flight. They know what their flight schedule is. They know how many people they should have at the airport, but they don't necessarily share all that data with the airport, with other parties like the TSA. So there's, I think, an opportunity there for better orchestration across the parties. And everybody's in this together. So the event organizers, the city organizers, the local transit capabilities, parking, rental cars, airports, airlines can all do a better job of sharing information and using that information to make a better experience for everybody, I think, is another opportunity that's out there. So I use the word orchestration. There's something there that forms a better partnership, better capability to act as an ecosystem, an entity, like Maurice mentioned.
Thanks, Kevin. I love the touch point you've all touched upon around this orchestration of the operational agility and the different entities involved. One of my closest friends lives in Paris, and during the Paris Olympics, they were planning to be so over capacity with the train system that they asked most of the large companies in the city, asked their employees to take their vacation and leave Paris during the time because they would be so inundated by tourists that they didn't have capacity on the trains for their locals. So I love this more innovative approach to future planning. And kind of touching on this innovation perspective, we talked a little bit about it, but as we think about the World Cup and even the upcoming Olympic cycles, what are some of the key opportunities that you think are the most important where you'd like to see airports and airlines really innovate? And what are maybe some of the current operational trends that really need to be accelerated in order to prepare for success around these events?
I'll throw a quick thought out there, Iris, from an innovation perspective. We've talked about forecasting. We've talked about understanding passenger volumes, some ways to do that. We've talked about the implication that has on things like security lines, like staffing and resources within the airport. I think the other thought around it could be, how do you automate some of these activities that are currently done by people. So how can we think about leveraging some emerging tools? Agentic AI is something all of our clients globally across industries are adopting. What's the opportunity to adopt some agents that can do the work that goes on, whether that's checking in, sharing information, consolidating information, helping a passenger be better informed about what to expect? Sean talked about some interesting technologies to leverage biometrics and use those as ways to get passengers through checkpoints more quickly. Talked about some wayfinding activities to help individuals get through the airport more quickly. I think all of those are tools that can be brought together. Some that are being used in airports and airlines today, some that are being used in other industries that can be adopted and brought to bear. So my thought there is, how can we automate things and digitize things a little bit more than they have been so far?
And for me, I'm looking at the automation, which is great, but if we don't have the ability to put all of us together in a room to properly and efficiently collaborate, it's going to fall by the wayside. So we're working on writing some agents, and it's great, but if I'm not going to be able to collaborate well with a carrier or a series of carriers or my other stakeholders to basically have a good solid ecosystem, it's going to become a challenge, because some of those tasks you do want to simplify. If I could write some agents, and I'm working on that now, to be able to simplify a few tasks, and you can work on creating some efficiency so you can redirect some of the human capital resources to work on more pertinent related type items. I think it creates more efficiencies, but realizing that you can have that true empirical engagement between those parties and putting them together and having that willingness to do so. I think as Sean alluded to, I mean, if you see one airport, you've seen one airport, but the fight, or I wouldn't say the fight, the disconnect a lot of the times you have in the airport with an airline is who owns the passenger. And in today's environment, we all have a stake and we all have skin in the game, because we want that satisfied passenger. How do we collaborate well to ensure that that passenger has the experience that they're looking for? Because all it takes is one. At the end of the day, is have a great flight and you come into my airport. I had a bad experience. It was the worst flight I ever had. The flight was great, but it's the last touch point that triggers the last factor, right? So the same thing. I've gone through the airport, but it was a bad flight. You get to your end game, you're like, wow, Miami's an airport I never want to go through again. But it wasn't the airport. It could have been the airline. So you have all of, or it might have been at the checkpoint, or have been coming back into the country. So you need to ensure, if we can collaborate well and create these data points and leverage AI and do all of these things, you should be able to work on mitigating some of those misperceptions, so to speak, and try to minimize that negative connotation that may come along with it.
Yeah, and we've seen in other cities for events like this, actually command centers being created with members from the airports, the airlines, the government, the local transit, et cetera. And not even necessarily a technology solution, but just a management structure to deal with the unknowns. As well, we've seen actually rehearsals for really extreme situations go on. So, Maurice, I don't know if that's something you guys are doing in Miami, but certainly we've seen that in other locations.
I'll just add one thought to that, Sean. And the rehearsals, I think, is a great idea. We've been talking like everything is going to come off flawlessly as expected. And Maurice used the irregular operation term earlier in the conversation. But rehearsing what needs to be done if something goes wrong. What happens if a weather event moves through? This is going on over the summer. So what happens on the East Coast if there's some kind of a weather event that disrupts traffic? What has to happen then? How do the things get adjusted? And that ability to share information and communicate some of that activity that we talked about, sharing information between airlines and airports, becomes even more important. Communicating with customers, passengers becomes more important in those kinds of events. So there's a lot to it. And as Sean alluded, how do you rehearse those kinds of things? How do you practice? How do you think about the different scenarios and what you're going to do when they occur is a really good practice to be involved with.
That's why they call it operational readiness, sir. Operational ready.
Well, you guys are making me excited. All of this thought that is going into both the customer experience as well as the back-end operations. Maybe I'll fly to the New York final for FIFA. I was avoiding it, but you're making me hopeful. I guess in closing, maybe I'll turn it to each of you and kind of hear a final remark or any closing thoughts or feedback that you might have for the group before we round up our call today. Maybe I'll kick it off with you, Maurice, if that's okay.
Not a problem. So from an airport perspective, we're looking at it that the industry is dynamic and it's growing, right? So we have the ability to plan and prepare for events like this. And it allows us to realize to be as efficient and as effective as you possibly can, you need to be able to collaborate. And that's across the entire ecosystem collaboration. So it's with our stakeholders. So it's with the airlines, it's with our janitorial crew, because we need clean bathrooms. It's with everyone that plays an integral part of the airport, but that also includes that we need to include our additional business partners. It's our IT providers, it's our solution providers, it's our hardware providers as well, because all of this ties into our ecosystem. So the future is bright as we develop and as we grow, because we expect to grow exponentially as the future for aviation and air transport is set. But when we go for event planning like this, it gets us the opportunity to also be able to refine what we do and how we do it. So it's a great opportunity right now. It's a great opportunity to be a part of this and being instrumental in making some of these things happen.
Okay, Sean, over to you. Any closing remarks?
Yeah. So what's the Mike Tyson saying? Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? So we can implement the best technology here. We can rehearse. We can have the processes, but the unexpected is going to happen. And the solutions to that will come from people. We at SETA, we have staff on site virtually at every airport that's involved in the World Cup, and obviously the upcoming LA Olympics. And we're planning ahead to make sure we've got extra staffing in place during that, as well as our global support organization. So we're there to support the systems and do whatever it takes, frankly, to make sure that these events are successful. Because Maurice is a very important customer of ours.
Thank you. And Kevin, last but not least, I'll pass it over to you, and then to close us out from here would be great.
Sure. No, I appreciate that, Iris. So a few last thoughts from my perspective. Sean mentioned the Mike Tyson comment. Sun Tzu, who another famous warrior, I guess, made a comment that every battle is won or lost before it's fought. So the reference there is the planning, the preparation, what needs to be done, and that applies to this situation. So definitely, again, thinking about that planning, the preparation, having the pieces in place, and it's not starting planning now. The World Cup dates and host cities were announced over a year ago, so hopefully that planning began a year ago, and efforts to execute those plans are well underway with some things that need to be done. But they need to be done. Whether it's around the infrastructure, the technology, the organization, the understanding of the ecosystem and who's involved in that, all those pieces need to come together to provide the operational resiliency that Maurice mentioned before that's so important. So those pieces need to happen and come together. And I think there's a great opportunity to do that. And then the other way to look at this, we've been talking about it as an event that organizations need to be ready for, like it's almost a tidal wave that's happening, and you get done with it and it's an opportunity to breathe a sigh of relief. The reality is this is a great opportunity for organizations, airlines, airports, other travel transportation organizations to get better. This is the opportunity to think about, how does innovation come to play? How do things get done differently in the future that don't just carry over to the World Cup and then go away, but are better ways to do things in the future. So this is an opportunity for all these organizations to really hone their capabilities and be better, not just in 2026 and be finished with it by July when the World Cup finals are completed, but to be better into the future.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate the time and everybody's insight today. Thank you for a great discussion, and I appreciate you all for joining us today. Have a great one.